everybody, this is Jackie Luqman, and welcome to another episode of Live and Coffee Current Events and Politics in Luqman Nation, the most dangerous show on social media anywhere. Look, y'all, tonight is going to be a quick show. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time bothering you tonight, but we absolutely want to talk about an event in history that I want to make sure, Luqman Nation really wants to make sure you understand how important the struggle for international freedom for African people around the world is, and just how committed this system of capitalism and imperialism is in making sure that none of us get it. So, strap in. This is just going to go, we're just going to go right into this history. I hope that if some of you didn't know about it, I hope you learned something new. And for those of you who did know about the importance of what Friday's date was, I hope you share this video with your friends and with people who you don't even like so they can learn this history so we can all understand who we're really fighting against and what the struggle really is. Before we get into this history, though, we want to remind you that if you like what you hear and what you see in Luqman Nation, please consider becoming a patron. A monthly patron provides $3, $5, $7, $20, or whatever you're comfortable with in monthly support to Luqman Nation. You can find us on Patreon under Luqman Nation, LuqManNation. And if you cannot do monthly support, we absolutely appreciate a one-time donation to Luqman Nation through PayPal. You can also find us there under Luqman Nation, LuqManNation. And as you can see, I'm riding solo tonight, y'all. So Mr. Luqman is out of town attending to some family matters. We love you very much, Mr. Luqman, but the show must go on, as they say, right? So, let's get into this history, shall we? International Rights Advocates, which is a United States-based human rights nonprofit, has filed a lawsuit against Tesla, Alphabet Incorporated, Dell Technologies, and Microsoft Incorporated, accusing the technology giants of being complicit in the deaths of children in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, or the DRC, who were forced to mine coltan, a metal used to make cell phones, telephones, and computers. Now, coltan is found in a number of countries, including Australia, Brazil, Canada, China, but 80% of the coltan used in all cell phone and computer and other technological manufacturing is mined in the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo. Why is this? Well, because the DRC has a long history of colonial exploitation that Western powers never allowed it to recover from, that still cripples that country today. So let's talk about that history. During the rise of industrialization in Europe during the 1870s and 1880s, nations needed resources to fuel their technological advances that they didn't have on their shores. So most of those resources were found in various places on the African continent. To avoid the inevitable conflict between the European powers in their scramble for African resources, German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck called a meeting where the leaders of Great Britain, France, Germany, Portugal, Belgium, and other European powers mapped out their claims to territory in Africa. Now, there's a long history of how Europe colonized and terrorized and exploited African nations, and we need to get into that one day. We absolutely will. But this history in particular is about how King Leopold of Belgium colonized the Democratic Republic of Congo, for his own personal property. Yes, King Leopold of Belgium claimed the Congo for his own personal self. The U.S. was the first country in the world to recognize Leopold's claim to the Congo. And it benefited the U.S. as well as Leopold and Belgium. Rich in rubber, Leopold enslaved the population of the Congo to force them to harvest the rubber, and ultimately caused the deaths of, listen to this y'all, 8 to 10 million Congolese. 8 to 10 million Congolese died under slave labor conditions harvesting rubber for King Leopold. King Leopold amassed an enormous wealth, so much so that by the opening of the 20th century, the Congo was the most profitable colony in Africa. It's estimated that Leopold made about 220 million francs, which is the equivalent today of about $1.1 billion. But under intense international pressure for the horrific crimes against the Congolese people that Leopold was committing, crimes like chopping off the hands and feet of people who didn't meet the harvest quota, the mass rape of women and girls, and mass murder, Leopold was forced to abdicate his authority in Belgium and over the Congo in 1950. But although the outright brutality stopped, the human and economic exploitation continued under Leopold's successor, which just happened to be his son, King Baudouin, from which the United States continued to benefit. As a matter of fact, here's a little known factoid. The uranium that was used to build the bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki were mined from the Congo under King Baudouin's rule. But in 1958, a young postal worker and traveling salesman helped found the Mouvement National Congolais, a political party that demanded independence from Belgium. Patrice Lumumba and the MNC advocated that the vast resources of the Congo should profit the people of the Congo for the improvement of the nation. He championed national unity, economic independence, and Pan-African solidarity. In fact, Lumumba was one of the delegates who represented the MNC at the very first All-African People's Conference in Accra, Ghana, in December 1958, which was attended by delegates from independent movements in areas still under European colonial rule, as well as by delegates from the independent African countries. This conference was important because it was established to represent the position that Africa should return to the people of Africa from colonial rule and exploitation. Its primary objectives were independence from the colonies, for the colonies, strengthening of the independent states, and resistance to neo-colonialism. What's neo-colonialism? That's a very important term to understand. People believe that neo-colonialism means a new form of colonialism. No, that's not quite what it means. Neo-colonialism means that colonial powers may step back from directly colonizing a country, but they will put in place a leader from among the population of that country to, in effect, rule in its place, to rule in its interests, and basically keep the doors open to the coffers so that the former colonial ruler can still take as much as it wants from the country and from the people, as long as the puppet ruler that the former colonial power sets up gets his taste too. That's neocolonialism. And that is still an enormous cancer upon the continent of Africa today. Now, it was at this conference, which was hosted by Ghanaian president and Pan-African giant Kwame Nkrumah, that Patrice Lumumba further solidified his Pan-Africanist beliefs. This conference and the people who attended it still hold paramount importance in the lives and ideology and understanding of Pan-Africanism among Pan-Africanists throughout the world today, including your friends here at Luqman Nation. Now, by now, it was clear to the Belgians that the Congolese people really just wanted to be free of them. So in 1960, the Belgio-Congolese Conference was convened to develop a plan among the various interests in the country to transition it from direct colonization to independence. At this time, Patrice Lumumba was leading some anti-colonial protests, and he was jailed for inciting anti-colonial riots. But his party was attending the Belgio-Congolese Conference, but they refused to participate in the conference unless Patrice Lumumba was in attendance. So Lumumba was released from prison, flown to Brussels, and the conference ultimately agreed upon a date for Congolese independence, which was June 30th, with national elections in May. Now, although there was a multiplicity of parties in the first election, the MNC, Patrice Lumumba's party, came out ahead in the elections, and Patrice Lumumba emerged as the leading nationalist politician of the Congo. In June 1960, Patrice Lumumba became the Congo's first elected prime minister. In his speech at the Congolese Independence Day ceremony on June 30th, Prime Minister Lumumba responded to the official speech delivered by King Baudouin in his own unscheduled address to the nation. In the speech, Lumumba famously said, quote, "Although this independence of the Congo is being proclaimed today by agreement with Belgium, an amicable country with which we are on equal terms, no Congolese will ever forget that independence was wrought in struggle, a persevering and inspired struggle carried out from day to day, a struggle which we were undaunted by privation or suffering and stinted neither strength nor blood." End quote. Lumumba was assailed in Belgian and U.S. press for his quote-unquote arrogance because of that speech. But he was also already being targeted by those same forces for removal. Because despite public support of independence for the Congo, the U.S. and Belgium were not prepared to allow Africans to have control over the vast wealth of raw materials that they had made so much money from for so long. So, under the guise of accusing Lumumba of being a communist, sound familiar? Who would allow the Congo's resources to be used by the U.S.'s Cold War enemies, the Soviet Union, the CIA and their counterparts in Britain and Belgium paid a group of Congolese military men, led by Joseph Mobutu, to assassinate Patrice Lumumba. On January 17th, 1961, after being tortured by Mobutu's men and forced to eat the paper on which the Independence Day speech was written, just 7 months after being declared Prime Minister of an independent Congo, Patrice Lumumba was shot by Mobutu's firing squad. Or shall I say, by the U.S.'s, by Britain's, and by Belgium's firing squad. Lumumba was one of 7 African leaders who all worked for independence from the colonial stranglehold of their countries. Opposition leaders of Cameroon, the opposition leader of Cameroon, Felix Moume, was poisoned in 1960. Sylvanus Olympio, leader of Togo, was killed in 1963. Mehdi Ben Barka, leader of the Moroccan opposition movement, was kidnapped in France in 1965, and his body was never found. Eduardo Mondlane, leader of Mozambique's Frelimo, which was fighting for independence from the Portuguese, died from a parcel bomb in 1969. And Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana was ousted in a Western-backed coup in 1966. And the seventh, Amilcar Cabral, leader of the West African Liberation Movement against Portugal, of the African Party for the Independence of Guinea and Cape Verde and Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde, was assassinated in 1973. Incidentally, friends, as we commemorate the birthday of Martin Luther King Jr. this weekend, we recognize that some among us who are advocating for reparations are referencing King's admonition that when the original Poor People's Campaign would arrive in Washington, D.C., that black people in particular, quote, are coming to get our check, end quote. Now, King did indeed reflect that when the enslaved in the U.S. were emancipated, they were emancipated to poverty, since they were given no land to make that freedom meaningful. And we're going to talk about Sherman's General Order Number 15 on another day. But what those folks who believe that the struggle for justice for black people in America, what they don't understand when they believe that our struggle is disconnected from the struggle for justice for black people throughout the diaspora, refuse to acknowledge, or maybe they just don't know, is that King very much connected the two struggles. So much so that King traveled to Ghana to attend the country's independence ceremony at the invitation of Prime Minister Kwame Nkrumah. It was at a reception in Ghana where King met and said to Richard Nixon, quote, "I want you to come visit us down in Alabama, where we're seeking the same kind of freedom the Gold Coast, or Ghana, is celebrating," end quote. In fact, King's focus toward the end of his life on speaking forcefully on the need for America to reject racism, poverty, and war was tied to the international struggle against capitalism and the oppression of non-white people around the globe. It was this criticism of capitalism and war, and ultimately imperialism, spearheaded largely by the U.S., that many believe were the reasons for King's assassination on April 4th, 1968. Like the assassinated leaders of the previously colonized African nations, King was trying to redistribute the vast wealth of the capitalist class in this country more equitably toward the poor, just as those African leaders were trying to do in theirs. The loss of this group of leaders, who all knew each other and had a common political project based on national dignity, crippled each of their countries with their loss, and continues to cripple the African continent today. So, ladies and gentlemen, friends, family, please understand that as we celebrate the birth and the life and the legacy of a radical advocate and warrior for justice, not just a peacemaker, not just someone who was dedicated to service, not someone who just had a dream, let us not forget that he clearly understood the struggle for freedom and justice for people in this country is directly tied to the struggle for freedom and justice of our brothers and sisters in the diaspora all around this world. So that's all we got for tonight, folks. We really wanted to make sure that you understood how important January 17th is in the lexicon of history of Pan-Africanism, why it's important to those of us here in the United States, because, see, the same imperial forces that assassinated Patrice Lumumba oppress you and me on these shores. The same forces that propped up Joseph Mobutu as a neo-colonial leader after the assassination of Patrice Lumumba continues to present us with these false choices for political candidates to keep us colonized in this country. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we are colonized in this country by the same imperial forces that assassinated all of our leaders who came before us. So thanks so much for joining us on this quick but very special episode of Coffee Current Events and Politics in Luqman Nation, the most dangerous show on the internet or anywhere. You can catch us every Sunday at around 7 p.m.-ish. We'll have special episodes from time to time in between. You can always catch Jacqueline Luqman on By Any Means Necessary on Sputnik Radio. You can go to the website for Sputnik Radio, which is Sputnik News, and click on the Listen Live button from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every weekday. And you can catch us live streaming on Facebook during the live hour from 3 to 4. Come in and chat and call in. As always, y'all, we appreciate your support. We thank you so much for sharing this video, subscribing to our channel on YouTube, following us on Facebook, inviting your friends to watch and engage with Luqman Nation. And as always, be good to each other and peace if you're willing to fight for it.